This is the third lecture and last lecture taken from Jeff Van Duser's book, Why Business Matters to God. During this lecture, we're going to look at the fall of man and also our theology of Christ and see how it informs the practice of business. In Genesis chapter 3, we read the following. Now the serpent was more crafty than the wild animals the Lord God had made. He said to the woman, Did God really say you must not eat from any tree in the garden? The woman said to the serpent, We may eat fruit from the trees in the garden, but God did say you must not eat from the fruit in the tree in the middle of the garden, and you must not touch it, or you will die. You will surely not die, the serpent said to the woman, for God knows that when you eat of it, your eyes will be opened, and you will be like God, knowing good and evil. When the woman saw that the fruit of the tree was good for food and pleasing to the eye, and also desirable for gaining wisdom, she took some and ate it. She also gave some to her husband, who was with her, and he ate it. Then the eyes of both of them were opened, and they realized that they were naked. So they sewed fig leaves together and made coverings for themselves. Then the man and the wife heard the sound of God and of the Lord God as he was walking in the garden in the cool of the day, and they hid from the Lord God among the trees of the garden. But the Lord God called to the man, Where are you? He answered, I heard you in the garden, and I was afraid because I was naked, so I hid. And he said, Who told you you were naked? Have you eaten from the tree that I commanded you not to eat from? The man said, The woman you put here with me, she gave me some fruit from the tree, and I ate it. Then the Lord God said to the woman, What is this you have done? And the woman said, The serpent deceived me, and I ate. So the Lord God said to the serpent, Because you have done this, cursed are you above all the livestock. And it goes on and it says, You will crawl on your belly, and you will eat dust all the days of your life. And I will put enmity between you and the woman, between your offspring and hers, and he will crush your head, and you will strike his heel. To the woman he said, I will greatly increase your pains in childbearing. With pain you will give birth to children. Your desire will be for your husband, and he will rule over you. To Adam he said, Because you listened to your wife and ate from the tree about which I have commanded you, you must not eat of. Cursed is the ground because of you. Through painful toil you will eat of it all the days of your life. It will produce thorns and thistles for you, and you will eat the plants of the field. By the sweat of your brow you will eat your food, until you return to the ground. Since from it you were taken, for dust you are, and dust you will return. From all this, we see that there are several different broken relationships from the consequences of man's sin. There's a broken God-human relationship. God no longer walked among us. There's a broken human relationship. We read that as soon as God asked man what was done, man quickly pointed a finger of blame towards woman, and each other felt shame for what they had done, and they no longer worked together. There's actually a broken human creation relationship. Man had to start to toil and work the soil for it to provide for him, instead of it providing anything that he wanted without him having to toil for it. Thus, it changed the nature of work. So therefore, business operates in a post-fall environment, and therefore it's also overly simplistic to think that we can just realign our purposes for business with the creation mandate and that all will be fine. These broken consequences led to a lot of different results. The broken relationship between God and human means that our work is now our identity. Prior to the fall, our identity was wrapped up in the fact that we were the one thing in creation made in God's image. Now our identity is in the work we do. That's evidenced in the fact that whenever you meet someone, one of the first things you ask he or she is, So, where do you work? What do you do? It also means that work is a necessity. We have to work in order to sustain our lives. We have to work in order to now buy food. Prior to that, we had to work in order to obtain food and harvest it. Our broken human relationship means that sometimes people are simply a means to an end. We can use people for our own benefit. Businesses sometimes look at as employees merely as an asset to be exploited. And likewise, the human creation relationship, broken relationship, means that we view natural resources as something for our own selfish gain, and that can be used to be exploited for that gain. What about our theology of Christ? About what we believe who Jesus is and how he worked and what his purpose was. What does that tell us about business? Well, in Philippians chapter 2, we read that Christ is someone who we believe was from heaven and came to this earth and humbled himself and became a servant, even to the point of death on a cross. And that after that death on a cross, that he was raised and was exalted into heaven, that at his feet every knee should bow. Well, this tells us that this God who came in flesh did not discriminate between us and him. He walked, lived, and suffered like us. Our interests were his interests, and thus we can't say that we or our business has any more or less entitlement to behave in a certain manner than anyone else. When on earth, Jesus understood the importance also of picking the right time to advance God's plan. He didn't always go about preaching and teaching to the masses. In fact, in the first chapter, after he healed a leper, he told that leper to not tell anybody, but instead to go to the temple and offer sacrifices to the glory of God. He didn't want to call a bunch of attention to himself. He realized there was going to be a time and a place for that. Or later on in Mark, in chapter 9 and verse 30, he specifically avoided the people because he wanted to teach his disciples. And so Jesus knew that there was a right time to advance God's plan grandly, and then there were times when he needed to kind of recuperate and set up. Therefore, we can kind of conclude that there are times during which a firm or a company, or even we as employees, may need to use our resources to better position ourselves to advance God's work. And therefore, perhaps, there may be times when we have to forego philanthropic activities to become more financially stable. What about the theology of Christ on the cross? We believe that he died for our forgiveness of sins. Thus, in doing so, he restored the broken relationships that we have, especially between God and man. There was much pain and much sorrow in the cross. Thus, if God himself suffered, who are we to think that doing what is right will not cause any pain? Therefore, we cannot expect a business, which even that which operates completely on Christian principles, to always be profitable, or to not be harmed while attempting to fulfill God's mandate. It didn't work that way for Christ, and it definitely won't necessarily work that way for us. Now, one last question that perhaps someone might ask. If Christ did, in fact, restore the relationships, then why do Christians still struggle? Didn't he win when he said, "It is finished"? Well, we might argue that, but Christ's victory on the cross could be similar to perhaps the successful landing of the Allies in Normandy during World War II. This operation turned the tide or the momentum of the war for the Allies, and most knew that it was inevitable that the Allies would win after they successfully landed at Normandy, yet they had to continue to fight until they reached Germany. Or perhaps another analogy might be this. Let's say that my Michigan Wolverines are playing a football game, and as normal, we're up by 31 points with, let's say 2 minutes to go in the fourth quarter. The game's not over, but for all intents and purposes, it is. But yet we still have to play the last 2 minutes of that game. We still have to tackle and to block and to play hard. But pretty much everyone knows in the stadium or watching it on TV would know that Michigan's going to end up winning because they're up by 31 points with 2 minutes to go. You still have to play out the game. Likewise, as Christians, we may know that we have the victory, but we still have to play out the game. We still have to do our best to live according to God's mandate. And in business, we have to live according to God's mandate for business, which means we have to go about our business in a way that provides goods and services that enable the community to flourish, to provide opportunities that allow people to use their God-given talents to further God's creation. That can be done through their employment, to foster community and build relationships, and to do all of this to glorify God through our service to others.